My name is Veeral Sheth. I'm a retina specialist from the Chicagoland area. I'm here to present data on the JADE trial, looking at OLN324 versus Faricimab. Yeah, so in the JADE trial, we're looking at OLN324, which is a bispecific targeting VEGF and Ang2. So if when you hear that, you think, well, how is this similar to Faricimab? And in some ways it is similar to Faricimab. But the key is we need to know the differences. Well, how is this different than Faricimab? So besides the target, there's three ways I would say is fundamentally different than Faricimab. One is the Ang2 potency. There's a 60 times higher Ang2 potency with OLN324 compared to Faricimab. The size, so it's about a quarter of the size of Faricimab, which hopefully allows for better tissue penetration. And there's a higher molar concentration. So we know it's a higher molar concentration compared to Faricimab and to aflibercept, both 2 and 8 milligrams. So that's really the key difference between how OLN324 is different than what we have today in the market. When we decided kind of what assets to look at, we have to look at what's kind of out there in the landscape today. So the best-in-class dual mechanism, and really the only in class, is Faricimab. And we have had really great real-world results with Faricimab. We've had it for a few years, and patients have been benefiting. So then the question is, well, how do we build on that success? So we like that mechanism of targeting VEGF and Ang2 because we know it works. And so the key is then how do we drive success in that arena? So looking at OLN, and how it's designed, the hope is that we can see better drying, more durability, and that's really what we're looking at early in the study and then hopefully in global phase 3 studies. So in the JADE trial, the key is, what are we really looking for? Safety, first and foremost. We saw great safety data, no IOI cases with both the 2 milligram and 4 milligram study drug groups. And we saw good efficacy signals, right? These trials are small, so we're not powered to look at vision necessarily. But what we did see from an anatomy standpoint is really nice drying. So as soon as week 1, when you compare Faricimab with both the 2 milligram and 4 milligram study groups, you see a separation in those OCT curves. In other words, patients are drier when they get the study drug as soon as week 1, and then you see it march out through week 12, which is the primary endpoint. And the nice thing is that when you follow these patients out further to week 20, 93% of the group that got the 4 milligram or the high dose study drug group didn't need any supplemental treatment. So we're seeing good durability signals. If you look at vision, we saw an edge with the study drug. So when we look at the OLN324 group, we see about a 1 to 1.5 letter edge improvement in vision compared to the Faricimab group. The things that surprised me the most in these findings is how robust the anatomy data was, right? So when we have our current treatments, we're pretty happy with what we have out in the market. We think we do a good job with our patients, these treatments dry well. So when you stack a new treatment up against these treatments that are already doing pretty well, it's pretty surprising to see how much better we can still do, right? So we can still dry these retinas out faster, and that hopefully leads to better efficacy results, so vision, and better durability. So when we look at safety data and more closely, we saw, what do we care about? We care about intraocular inflammation first and foremost, right? We have very safe treatments today in the real world, so everything that comes moving forward, we need to really meet that bar. So we saw a really nice clean safety profile, 0 cases of IOI in the study drug group, so both the low dose and high dose OLN324. We saw 1 case of IOI anterior segment inflammation in the Faricimab group, which was limited. It was treated with the topical steroids and that resolved. So in terms of anatomy, one of the important things is we want to look at what percentage of patients are DME free, right? And so in other words, is this resolving the active issue, which is fluid in the retina? And when we look at it, we saw 50% more patients at week 12 were DME free in the OLN324 4 milligram group compared to the Faricimab group, which again, that's a really nice, not just fast drying, but deep drying effect. The most important thing I think from this trial is to show people that we can still improve upon the treatments that we have, right? We know that there's still a significant unmet need. Patients are getting treatment today, they're getting great treatments today, but we still have room for improvement. And this is kind of one of the avenues that I think that we're looking at, and I'm excited that this is going to move to global phase 3 studies later this year. So larger trials, phase 3 trials, for example, really need to answer the efficacy question. Where do we stand with these new treatments compared to the gold standards or the standards of care, right? And so we want to be able to improve quality of life for our patients. How do we do that? We have to improve vision outcomes, and we have to improve durability outcomes. So in other words, patients seeing better and coming in for less injections is a meaningful impact on their lives. So AI is a hot topic obviously these days, and it's an important one because I think the speed and the pace of discovery in that area is so fast that sometimes we want to jump right in, but by the time we jump in, that moment is already passed. So I think we're still learning a lot about how we're going to use AI in our day-to-day. One of the ways we're using it in our office is patient identification. So for clinical trials, for example, we can use AI that integrates our EMR and our imaging, and we can find patients that might be really good ideal candidates for clinical trial. The other way we use it is getting good real-world data. A lot of the real-world data we get are like chart reviews, for example. Well, we can do better than that. We can use that chart review, we can incorporate imaging data, and we can start to get really important real-world insights we haven't been able to do with a more manual effort. So I think those are the ways that AI are going to be changing things in the near term. In the long term, I think it's going to be great just with the amount of data we generate in trials and in the real world, especially imaging data, to find ways of identifying patients that might need help that we're not catching today. So I think this question of using AI as a surrogate for their healthcare or actually seeing a physician is a tricky one, because I do think that AI has the ability to give people access that may not have had access, and access to like really good care potentially, right? So you've got a problem, you don't have a physician down the street you can go to, or maybe you don't have insurance, you don't feel comfortable going to a physician. You can ask your AI. But the thing with AI is it's only going to be able to give you a good answer if you can put good input into it. And so I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done around it, but I think absolutely it's going to be a valuable tool, if it's not already, for people in many ways. Now, do I think it's going to be a full-on substitute for healthcare? No, I think you still need people that know what they're looking at, that know how to interpret these results, that know that this patient doesn't exist in a vacuum, and that there are so many other variables that we have to consider. And then when it comes to treatment, how do we pick the best treatment for these patients? And so I think there's that element and the human element. I think still there's a human element to healthcare and to medicine that we haven't quantified yet that you don't want to necessarily miss out on.